So I created this effect, which I posted on the realtimevfx.com forums and also the Facebook group Realtime VFX, and I've had a few people contact me asking how to make this effect from beginning to end using Unreal's new Niagara VFX editor. So the first thing you want to do if you're new to Niagara is to go into the Edit plugins, go to the FX category, and select Niagara and Niagara Extras. Check those. The editor will need to be restarted afterwards. You get a little warning. Go ahead and do that. I've already done it, so I don't need to do that now. Then the first thing you need to do is create a new Niagara emitter. In the content browser, just hit right-click, FX, new Niagara emitter. I actually have one right here. I'm going to name it NFX Mesh Morph Emitter. You're going to need two module scripts. So right-click, FX, Niagara module script. I'm going to name that one NMS for Niagara module script. Mesh Morph Update. This is for the update module, particle update module. And then another Niagara module script, NMS Mesh Morph Spawn. This is for the spawn module. And then last but not least, FX Niagara System, and sys for Niagara System, Mesh Morph. You can obviously name these whatever you want. So I'm just going to save these off just in case the editor blows up. So the first thing you want to do is in the system is to come in here under track, go to emitter, select your emitter that you just created. You'll see the particles. Yay. Compile, save, close that out. You're not going to need this until you place the emitter in your scene. And then under the module scripts, open this up. The errors show up the first time you open it, but if you just hit compile, it goes away. For this one, it's the update module. So I'm going to deselect spawn script and leave only particle update script and module. So I'm going to compile, apply, save. And actually, I could tab these off. And then the spawn, do the same thing. Come in here, leave spawn script and module, compile, apply, save. And just for ease of finding it in the right click context menu, under category, I'm just going to put my name, Ken, just so I can find it easy. Obviously, in your project, you're going to want to use a more logical name. So, Ken, file, apply, save, file, apply, save. So now we're good to go. So in the emitter, we'll open that up. I really do not like this orbit mode. So under the little arrow in the corner, you can drop down, get out of orbit mode, and then the controls are just like they are in the normal level editor. So it's a lot easier to find your stuff. And if you don't like the background, you can go into Window, then Preview Scene Settings, and you can just turn off Show Environment so you can see your particles easier, or you can add your own background. It's all up to you. Okay, so there's a few things in this emitter that you just want to get rid of right away for this tutorial, and that's going to be the add velocity. That's what's causing the particles to shoot up. So you can either disable it by unchecking it, or just delete it with the garbage can. I'm just going to delete it because I'm not going to use it later. And then you have acceleration force. You can see that after you get rid of that, they don't fly around anymore, but they fall. And that's essentially the gravity they've added here, negative 980 on the acceleration force. I'm not going to use it, so I'm just going to delete it. In the effect, it's basically spawning particles on one mesh, on the surface of a mesh, and then using the curl noise force to explode it away from that mesh, and then we're going to just alert back to the position of a second static mesh. So for that, I always like to test out my curl noise because sometimes it gives me problems. So under the particle update module, you want to click the plus here. I just search for curl. You're going to want curl noise force. And then from there, it's going to show an error. It says it has unmet dependencies, and that's basically because it's found underneath the solve forces and velocity. And essentially, the modules are ran from top to bottom, so you can't solve the forces of a curl noise after you've already solved it. So you just got to pull this up. If you click the fix now, it's essentially just going to do the same thing. It's going to move the module above. So now you have a curl noise force. I'm going to add a strength just so I can see it. I'll start with 1,000, and just to make sure it works, you can just play around with this for a little bit, find something you like. Another thing I'm going to get rid of is spawn rate. You can see that the particles are spawning over time. I don't want that. I want them all to spawn instantaneously. So I'm going to trash the spawn rate. add a new module, spawning, instantaneous, spawn versus instantaneous. Essentially, I'm going to spawn, let's say 1,000 particles at time 0, and then you can see them just kind of push through that curl noise. Okay, so now we have that. And we know that the curl noise is working, so just leave that for now. The next thing is to spawn the particles on the initial mesh. So first thing we're going to need are some variables. These need to be stored off in the emitter and also in the module. We'll get to that in a second. So under particles, I'm going to go here, hit the plus to create a new variable. It's going to ask me to make a new one or pick for ones that already exist down here, but we're not going to need those right now. So what we need is a static mesh. So I'm going to call this particles.static mesh start. This is the initial static mesh that we're going to start from. And then I'm going to add another, make new, static mesh. I'll call this one static mesh end. And then from here, we can define which meshes we want to use. So under the particle spawn, because there's already a set variables category, I generally just take them in there. So once you grab your variable, you drag it, you'll see that the green box here is dotted. That means you're able to drop it in that category. And then you have a static mesh here. And I do the same with the static mesh end. There we go. Okay, so in these, I went to static mesh start. In the video, I believe I use a sphere. So you obviously don't see any assets. If you want to use the ones that are shipped with the engine, go to view options, show engine content, and then you get all those, which gives you the ability to access something like a basic sphere, which is this guy. CPU access error, just click fix now. You'll have to save that asset out to make those changes persist the next time you the editor. And then static mesh end. Oh, did I select skeleton mesh by accident? I believe I did. So I'm just going to delete this from both places. Static mesh start, add static mesh, and name that to static mesh end. Okay. Take that, bring it into set variables. And now I have my other static mesh. I'm just going to use a cone, just like I did in the video on the forum. Same thing, fix now. I always compile, apply, save all the time just in case the editor crashes or something. So now we want to access the, let's just start with the cone as the spawning position. So we're going to want to go back to our spawn script. But to be able to access the spawn script, we actually need to add it to the particle spawn. So in the category that I created under kin, since we checked the right things in the list to begin with, it'll show up here, NMS, mesh morph spawn. That's what I created earlier. Put that in, you'll see nothing under it. That's completely fine. If you double click it, it will open the asset if it's not already open, but I tabbed it off earlier. So you can see that in here. And I want to use the original cone. Where'd it go? Set variables. The initial cone is a spawning point. So I want to take a random point on the surface of the cone to spawn the particles, and then we'll go from there. So on the spawn module, you're going to want to click a new variable. And actually, just to save time, I'm going to copy static mesh start, this variable name. In here, click plus to add a new variable. The variable names don't carry over from the emitter to the modules, so you're going to have to go to particles, make new, static mesh, and then the same exact name that you put in the emitter. So paste static mesh start. And then we're also going to want to save off positions on the second mesh for the particles to return to. So I'm going to do the same exact thing, go back to the emitter, grab static mesh end, copy, come back into my spawn script, add particles, make new, static mesh, and then paste that in, static mesh end. So to get the random point on a static mesh surface, we need to drag out of this pin. The context menu will automatically bring you Niagara commands that can only be used with static mesh. So if you in there type random try, it'll give you a random try coordinate. And then from there, if you want to get the world space position, it's actually shorthand WS, but you want to drag again. See how I right click in here and you don't see anything when I type WS? It's because context menu is not enabled. So you drag out of the pin, type WS again. Now you get random try position world space. Drag the coordinate you got here into here. And then to use that position in the spawn script, so when the particle spawns, it'll use this position. You need to go into map set, and we're going to use a variable that actually already exists on the particle, and it's called particle.position. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then we drag that out into here. And we should apply, save, and then look in here. And then these will just change the preview here so we can get a better view. And you can see it's starting at the sphere, which is, I believe, the one I wanted to use. Start, yeah, sphere. Okay. The next thing we want to do is essentially the same thing, but we're going to want to cache out the locations of random tries on the second mesh, which is what we got here. Same thing again. Actually, you can just copy and paste these two nodes, make it a little easier. Make sure I grab the right ones. There we go. And then out of the end, I'm going to put that in both of these. And then we're going to want the end vector that we saved off. Actually, we didn't save off yet. So you're going to want to click a new variable. You're going to want particles make new, a new vector that's going to save the 3D world space of the second mesh, random positions on the triangles. So we're going to call that particles mesh. Let's call it aesthetic mesh end position, or pause for short. And then I'm just going to copy that, come back over to my spawn script, add a new field, particles. Since they don't carry over, you're going to have to make a new vector, which is fine. Vector, and just paste that name right in there. Now, when you drag this in here, getting the end mesh, random triangle coordinate, and we're going to save that off in this variable. So compile, apply, save, as always. Now that information is being saved here, so we can access that. So if I just pull this back, you can see it's spawning on the sphere. And it's going through the curl noise. But in the video I showed, the noise, actually, they spawned, and then a few seconds later, the noise kicked in and shot the particles out. So to do that, we're going to go into the curl noise force here. And essentially, it's just going to apply this noise strength of 1000 to it at all times, and we don't want that. We want to wait a little bit, and then boom, set it off. So go in here, and you're going to want to change the input to a curve for this example. So we got a curve. Sometimes the initial point here can be selected, it can. So you just take the box. There's actually a point up in the corner there. You can set the initial value to 0, 0. And now if you play it, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to die off because there's 0 force being applied. And this is over the normalized age of the particle, which essentially means that this is the spawn of the particle, this is the death of the particle. It doesn't matter if it's 1 second long, 100 seconds long, or a year long. It's just going to apply this force over its lifetime. So that being said, I'm going to change the particle lifetime to a static value because it just makes things easier. Let's just go 4 seconds to make it easy. So all particles spawn and die over 4 seconds and not a randomized value like it was before. And then also the sprite size is between 2.5 and 8, and I'll just make it even 5 for simplicity. And then since it's 4 seconds long, let's say about 2 seconds in, so a little bit before the halfway mark here, I'm just going to add a new point, and a new point. Just make sure these are value 0 before I set this really high to 1000 like we had before or something. Back down to 0. And if you hit this little arrow here, it's going to just fit the curve to the chart here. And you can see them, no force, and then I'm going to just apply a lot of force and have it die off over a short amount of time. So we can watch that in action here. So the force is being applied, and then it's being eased off. It's not going to be pulled back in because we didn't set the force to negative. It's not going to pull back in. We're going to do that manually. So compile, save. So the second thing we need to do is take the position of the cone that we saved off in that variable, and then have the positions lerp back to those locations. So let's go ahead and go to our update script here. And we're going to want to take, let's flatten this out. And we're actually going to want to create one more variable, and that's another curve that we're going to use to drive the lerp from wherever they end up from the curl noise back to the position in the second mesh. And that's really going to be a simple 0 to 1. So let's go ahead and make particles. It's going to be a curve for floats. So we're going to do that. I'm going to call it curve to lerp to second mesh. Terrible name, but it proves the point. You can then take that. I like to put all my variables in the same place, so I'm going to put it in here with the other ones. So now we got a curve for floats. Awesome. Minimize all these to reduce confusion. And then from here, so roughly halfway through, what is this, like, we're at 1 second. So maybe we want to, at about 3 seconds, start pulling back in. So that's going to be around the 0.6, 0.75 range. Add a key. Just call it 0.065. And then the second key, value of 1 at a time of 1. There we go. And this again is going to correlate to the normalized age, and I'll show you that in the update script here in a second. So essentially, the particle is going to start, hang out for a bit, blow up, and then we're going to grab those particles and bring them back to the second mesh. So to do that update script, I want to come in here. You're going to get that curve. That's what's going to drive the whole thing. So we need to grab the name of it, as always, just copy it, come back into the update script. We're essentially done with the spawn script, so you can close that out. Just make sure you save it. Update. We're going to add a new particles. Make new. Curve for floats. It's essentially the curve we made before. Paste in that name so we can access it. And then to get the data from that curve, pull out here. You say sample curve. And then this is the point. Right now it says 0. So that's going to correlate to right here. We don't want that. Over the life of the particle, we need the value of that. So we need normalized age. Particles at normalized age. Again, this is a variable that's already stored in the particles. You don't need to create it. So drag that into here. So when a particle is born, it's going to have a value of 0. When a particle dies, it's going to have a value of 1. And that correlates directly to part 0 and part 1. Okay. Now, need to lerp. So we're going to lerp from whatever position they're at back to the position of the second mesh. So value C is the lerp value. And then for A, which is the position that it's currently at, which we know we can grab from particles, particles.position, we want to take its ribbon facing, no. Particles position. Take that, put it in A, and then we're going to lerp to position B, which we know is the variable we saved up earlier. Static mesh end position. Copy that, come back to your update module. And it's a vector, so make a new vector, paste that name in there, and we're going to go to that position. And we want to set its old lerped position to the new position, so we come back in here, particles, particle.position. Drop that in, make sure these are linked up, apply, save. So now we can come back, compile, apply, save, just for sanity reasons. Then go ahead and play, shoots out, and doesn't do anything. Let's find out what we didn't hook up. Okay, start end. Let me double check the spawn module. Bring static mesh end position, static mesh end position. Curve. And it might actually just be the color. They might be disappearing before they're coming back. So let's go into color just to make sure we can see them. Just make sure they're always white from beginning to end. And no, they're not coming back. Rookie mistake. You need to add the update module. Same way we did the spawn one, go to particle update, click the plus, and then your module will show up here, NMS Morph update. Now, there we go. Comes back to the cone there. Just to be safe, whenever I create an effect, except for this time, obviously, I create the emitter. I'll just jump right in here and just add the spawn in the update, so something like that doesn't happen in the future. And now it's, the effect is essentially done. You just play with the lifetime, the colors. Like in the video, I started out with red, really bright, and crank it to like 30, so you get that bloom showing up. Set the time to 0, because it'll show up white if you don't. And then I ended with blue, so blue 30, and then you can see it starts red, lerps to blue. What is this, around a little before 2 seconds, so a little below halfway. Let's create 2 more of these. Make it a red 30, blue 0. This one should be blue 0, or blue 30, yeah. So now it's going to stay red the entire time until it hits about the halfway mark. And then switch to blue. There you go. That's pretty much it. From there, I mean, it's just all aesthetics for now. So if you want to have it fade out at the end, or do some silly stuff, that's about it. If you have any questions, obviously, you can always message me on Facebook. You can message me on Real-Time VFX. You can leave comments anywhere you want. Pretty easily accessible guy. And I hope you enjoyed.